Good afternoon. My name is Ostrovnaya. Today I'd like to present you a project that I've done with Elena Podkolzina. It's about entry in procurement auctions and manipulative power of public procurers in this area. So motivation is very simple. So public procurement constitutes a significant part of GDP in many countries. However, entry costs that a company should carry out in order to come to the auction and bid are very high. So they are rather high even in developed countries like in the European Union countries, and that's why it may somehow decrease the attractiveness of public procurement for the companies. And situation may be even worse in developing countries when we also have some kind of red tape and problems with corruption. Yep.
Is that for each auction or it's?
It's
yes.
For each auction. Yep. This figure, you mean?
Right.
Yep. One procedure. Yep. We know that corruption is a problem also as the entry in auctions in many countries, and we have some anecdotal evidence about many these many facts in Russia. So it may be another barrier to entry. E-procurement seems to decrease entry costs. It's interesting to see how do these lower entry costs in electronic procurement may encourage entry or somehow affect it in a potentially corrupt environment. So we have actually two directions of the related literature. One of them is mostly a theoretical one. So there are some papers about factors that affect the entry of companies. So how the reserve price is established, how many companies are in the market, what are entry costs of participating in the public procedure. Also, there is a huge literature on corruption problems in public procurement. So how corrupt procurer can manipulate some criteria, or that's why some companies may have low incentives in order to enter auctions, or how corrupt procurer may somehow distort the results of the auctions, all that stuff. Also have empirical part of the related literature. In many countries since 2000 years, procurement reform was implemented, and there are some evidence that e-auctions tend to decrease costs of participation. So in traditional procurement, companies should carry very high preparatory costs. So it should submit, it should at first get some information about the auction. So there are some seeking costs, search costs. Also, it should submit all the necessary documentation to fill it by hand, and then come to the procurer's office and give this documentation to him. Then at a certain time, the company should go again to the procurer's office and participate in auction. So these costs are very high, especially transport costs from companies that are situated in other cities or in other regions. However, as we know from the literature, the impact of introduction of electronic procurement depends very much on the internet penetration on the country. So if we concern Italy, like the one country with a high internet penetration at the moment when e-procurement reform was conducted, here we have some positive results, like the increase in entry and decrease in price. However, in India and Indonesia, the results are quite opposite. So there was no change in prices, but there was a high change and significant change in the performance of the procurement contracts, because there were lots of small companies who performed projects very poorly, and they don't have an access to internet. So when this e-procurement reform was introduced, they couldn't participate in these auctions, and they were and the other companies came to these procedures. More the companies with high reputation that could perform these projects better. So there was a change in the quality. And we are going to see what's happening in Russia. What are the possible changes of e-procurement reform? And in this project, we have two parts. One of them is theoretical one, and I'd like just to cover it in a couple of minutes. And the other part is empirical, and it's in very progress. So I really appreciate your comments about it. So in this model, we have a simple model of sealed auction, first price sealed auction with entry cost. So each company has some costs of executing a contract, some production costs that are private information, and also some entry costs of entering this auction. One of our assumptions is that when the entry costs are lower, the final price is also lower. So we've just picked up the distribution of the production costs so that it satisfies this assumption, because it's in accordance with the studies, with the previous studies, like in Italy or in other countries. We have two types of public procurers. So one of them is potentially corrupt procurers, he can take bribes, and the other procurer is non-corrupt. Also, our procurers have something like a manipulative power. So they could set restrictive requirements to the companies in order to conclude a contract with a concrete bidder.
Yeah, just for this slide. So it's not one procurer that you have in the model, right?
One. No. Yeah, that's true. But in one auction, that's one procurer.
In comparative studies.
Yes. Yes.
So it's only one type, and you are going to compare whether.
Yeah, that's true. I'd like just to show you a simple example of what we mean by restrictive requirements. So here you can see a map. It's some part of Nizhny Novgorod in Russia, and the red dot, I don't know, shape is a public procurer, and there are some blue dots around him. That's the gasoline stations. So public that's open information. Everybody can come at Google Maps or Yandex Maps and see this. The addresses of all these gasoline companies, gasoline stations. So the procurer can name the area around him, so choose a minimum distance around him, so to exclude some part of these gasoline stations from participation in the auction. So if he chooses this area, only one gasoline company can participate in the auction. If he chooses a wider area, there are 3 companies that can enter and make a bid. Yep.
Excuse me, to understand. So this is for, if I'm a municipality, I'm going to auction, who is going to refuel my cars?
Yes. Yep.
So all my cars are going to go to this gasoline station, right?
Yes. Yeah, you want to buy gasoline through some gasoline stations. Thank you.
This is to say that the procurer has some discretionality in choosing rules in this first price auction.
Yes. Yeah, and he can restrict by this power participation of some companies. Yeah.
So what they do in medical, for instance, they are giving a list of medicines, and they're saying this specific, I need like one pill, and this one pill is made on only one factory.
Yeah.
That's basically.
Actually, we have the same story, but I'll show it. Yeah. So that's just how these restrictions work. And we have some results that procurers of both types can use can set restrictive requirements to the bidders. So non-corruption procurer guarantees with this option the public procurement contract execution, and corrupt procurer just extracts a bribe. Also, the second result is that if lower entry costs, as we assumed before, decreases the contract price paid by non-corrupt procurer, then it may have a different effect on the price paid by the corrupt procurer, depending on the initial level of the entry costs and the magnitude of its decrease. So because very, very low entry cost lower than the threshold may provoke favoritism, give procurer additional incentives to it. So he can extract higher bribe. That's why he manipulates contract conditions frequently, and then that's why the price may increase after the reform, after e-procurement reform that decreases this entry cost. And we have this e-procurement reform in Russia. Basically, there are two main steps. On the one step, since 2006, all information about public procurement was placed online. So all these contract details, the project requirements to the bidders, and details about the bidding process. So all the bids, the names of the companies, results of the biddings. And the second step, also open bid auctions were converted into electronic format. So now, since 2011, companies may bid, they should bid actually online, because the procurer doesn't have an option not to organize these electronic auctions and organize them in oral outcry format, something like that. It's necessary to mention that the range. Yep.
And the electronic auction is centralized?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. They may be.
Not centralized in the sense that all the data goes to Moscow. I apologize for the simplification. Or it's at the local level.
At the local level.
So the data is only at the municipality in some small village, and it doesn't.
I understand it. No.
The system is the system centralized?
Yes.
The server is okay.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I misunderstood it. Yeah.
So
and information. There is double information in this platform, and information about the one website. Yes.
So there is some oversight outside the municipality.
Yes. All procedures and the rules were the same before and after this reform. And the main difference was that these outcry auctions, open bid auctions, were converted in electronic format. So it may reduce entry cost, but we don't know, of course, whether they did it or not, by less paperwork that the company should do. And also it makes bidding anonymous. So the companies don't know who their competitors are in the auction, during the auction. They just know some kind of numbers of these bidders, but these numbers can tell nothing. So this bidding becomes anonymous, and it may change the behavior of the company during the bidding. However, as we'll see later, it's not the case of our sample. Fortunately.
In the previous open auction, you have to be present in a room and bid.
Yes.
So you see all the others bidding with you in that auction, or it was a sealed auction?
No, we have another type of procedure, sealed auction. That's another. And here, yes, all the companies were in the same room. They see the behavior of each other, their bids.
So the main difference is that between the e-auction and the open auction is that one is a virtual room, the other is a physical room, and in the virtual room you do not know the name of the others, but you are just you are competing with numbers.
Yes.
With numbers. While in the physical room you see the manager of each room which is bidding. This is the main difference.
Yes.
And the cost, the entry cost.
And the entry cost.
Probably going and preparing the paperwork is more expensive.
Yeah, that's true. So there are two main differences. What about internet penetration in Russia? at the beginning of the reform. So here are some statistics about the countries who implemented these reforms, like Austria, Italy, where at the time of the reform, internet penetration was very high or maybe intermediate level. We have Russia. Here, in the beginning of the reform, the internet penetration was rather high, and it was high for some city centers. And we have information about India, Indonesia, when the results were opposite to the results of from Austria, with a very low internet penetration. That's why in these cases there was a decrease in entry costs for some companies and increase in other. And maybe in Russia will not have this situation.
It doesn't tell you much, because companies probably they all have 100%. Once you select who is bidding, probably all the companies have internet access.
Yep.
So I don't care about somewhere without internet. Anyway.
Yeah, that's true. But it shows me that the internet penetration was rather high in Russia.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It should be even rather higher than for ordinary people, for companies. Yeah, that's true.
But it wouldn't affect your results if you put it on.
No, of course not. Yeah, of course. We've chosen Nizhny Novgorod region because for several reasons. One of them was that it has a very transparent side before the reform, before the second stage of the reform. So at the regional site, we have the same information about the public projects, about the contracts concluded, and about the bidding process. Now we can extract this information, and we may assume that there was no such a substantial shift in informational level than for other regions. So we have 600 public auctions held in 2008-2013. Before the reform and after the reform, there were two types of them, so seed bid auctions and open bid auctions. Before the reform, they were in outcry format, after an electronic one. And also it's necessary to say that the behavior of public procurers, so how they choose this type of procedure, doesn't change after the reform significantly. So there are around 60% of sealed bid auctions before and after. And however, we can see a change in the number of bids, both in open bid auctions and in sealed bid auctions before and after the reform. So before the reform, in all outcry auctions, there was just one bid. That's very sad, of course. And also, it not only tells us about very low level of competition, but also that there was no kind of shift in the behavior of the companies when the bidding becomes anonymous. So there was no just bidding. There was just one competitor in this room.
You also had to qualify to be allowed to be a bidder, right?
Yeah, that's
so
true.
It's not only that people didn't want it. It might be that some people wanted, but they were not allowed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And maybe they didn't want because of the high entry cost, or maybe because of the procurer's actions. Yep. Yep.
You also mentioned at the beginning that there is a restriction of the area, right?
Yes.
So is the comparative here is for the same restricted area?
We have some we have information about the restrictive contract rules, and they didn't. No. We don't control for them in this. No. But okay, so I just like. Unfortunately, I have very few minutes, so I just like to say that we try to instrument the number of bidders by the restrictions imposed by the public procurer. So we have Nizhny Novgorod, and we have a very big difference among different municipalities. In Nizhny Novgorod, a number of companies that could come and submit a bid if the procurer restricts participation of the gasoline companies that have gasoline stations in these municipalities. And the same situation we have about the districts of the Nizhny Novgorod city. So in some district, like in this one or in this, there are just 1 or 2 companies that have gasoline stations there. So we assume that procurer can set restrictive rules, choosing more choosing contract terms so to include the more number of parts of Nizhny Novgorod region or Nizhny Novgorod city, and that will restrict the potential number of entries. So that's obvious that there are few companies that have gasoline stations in many regions, and it also decreases the entry of the companies in turn. So when there is a restriction, there is no restriction, one bidder is in 37% of the auctions. When there is restriction on the level of Nizhny Novgorod or Nizhny Novgorod region, half of the auctions are with one bid. And if procurer restricts both the number of districts in Nizhny Novgorod region and in Nizhny Novgorod, the entry is even lower. Yes.
You have the number of bidders. Do you see the IDs of the bidders?
Yes.
So, if so, are the bidders competing in more than one region? Do they have more than one station? If I'm bidder Z, do I have also a station here and compete for this contract or in somewhere else as well?
Yes.
So maybe could it be the case that I collude? So I know that now I'm more open, and I say, okay, you bid first in that region, you win that contract, and I win here. So still, we have, you see, more observed, like from 1 to 2, but now this is your location and this is my location.
Thank you, that's a great idea.
If you can see the IDs, so if the IDs are constant.
We can see that we know the number of gasoline stations and the addresses for each company. So thank you. We can do it. From now we have these preliminary results. So we used 2SLS. At the first step, we ran regressions of the number of bids, and we instrumented using these restrictions of the public procurer. So on the number of districts in Nizhny Novgorod or Nizhny Novgorod regions, or in both of them, and we have rather strange results for the type of the auction before and after the reform. So electronic auctions doesn't have any impact on the number of bids in comparison with sealed bid auctions. However, they led to lower relative prices. And that's a bit strange, and we have, that's for the different specifications. Also, we have another index of restrictions based on a set of parameters, and it has the same effect on the participation, and we see not very significant effect of electronic auctions on the number of bids, so they don't increase participation significantly, but they do decrease relative prices of the contracts. That's a bit strange, and we have two possible explanations for it. So maybe that's just the different structure of bidders of electronic auctions in comparison to open bid auctions. So there are not more companies, but there are different. Maybe there are more trying to compete with each other. That's why they decrease prices. They highly decrease prices. Or the other story is about entry of affiliated companies. So maybe somehow sealed bid auctions attract more affiliated companies, because companies may perceive sealed bid auctions as a more manipulative procedure than electronic bid auctions. The electronic bid auctions was a new procedure. Maybe some companies don't know how it works and all that stuff, and they try to sustain something like collusion in sealed bid auctions. So
the problem is that you're using the machinery of build around the continuous variable on pretty much a discrete variable. When you have one or two bidders, that's not, So, I mean,
Yes.
it is 10% significant. As in,
yeah, that's true.
I
But that's-
don't know if it's worthwhile to go into like binary regressions kind of things. But I don't think there is a big story behind that. It's just the property we're taking. Your lowest possible amount of bidders binds. You see my point?
Yep.
So it's not really the economic story behind that. It's data handling.
Yep. But we can, I think, somehow try to do it.
If you
Is
only
it
have
to s-
one or two bidders,
Yeah.
you can just run a.
Yeah.
If you
Well,
have
that's
three
one.
bidders, then you are in trouble. But then you can do a binary regression of one bidder or more than one bidder,
Yeah.
right? How many have like
But
two bid- like three bidders?
not many with 3.
No,
Like 5.
few of them, something like that.
So yeah, then you can just do the binary regression. See if it's gonna be more severe.
Thank you. And also just, I'd like to mention the increase in participation of affiliated companies in sealed auctions. So before electronic reform, affiliated companies participated together in like 5-10% in each year, but after the reform we see a significant increase in their numbers. So the companies come together to sealed auctions. They don't actually bid, so don't compete with each other, and it's interesting for us to see why they do it in sealed auctions first of all. And actually I think that we should somehow maybe we shouldn't use definitive in this situation, because we don't have a treatment and control group now, because both groups of auctions were treated by this affected by this reform. So that's our problem at this moment. So thank you.
Well, to the last one, you still have other regions that you can use as discrete.
Yes.
If they are similar in everything else, then you have to show that the statistics before are similar, and that could be your control group. Well, one suggestion is to go to the IDs to see if there is the same players over time, or that there will be some collusion story. But I would be more interested in disentangling the first stage of your instrumental variable, where you instrumentalize a number of restrictions by certain, the number of bidders by
this.
the question would be, what drives that discretion? Would it be political variables? So could you add, because these are municipalities, right? The bidders.
Not
Who are the bidders?
bidders? Guess
The procurers.
procurers, some hospitals, schools. So there are at municipal and regional level.
Okay, if that is so, do municipalities have different oversight, political competition? And my story would be that a municipality that has more political competition, more oversight, more newspapers, they would be more prone to have restrictions just to anticipate that they are not provided.
There's like zero politics municipal.
But
So I don't know.
Actually,
But instead of
at least we can see whether it's-
instrumentalizing, you may open the black box of that first stage. What drives restrictions? Right. That more political competition, by anticipation, you will have more restrictions. That is my story. And I will be more and I would have more discretion if I'm a dictator in my municipality.
yeah, let's see.
Is something that we discussed with Elena previously, Paris as well, but I want to go on and see if, okay, if you want to compare the two kind of auction, that is the open auction in the physical room and the e-auction in the virtual room, and if you want to check that the two the main difference between the two is entry cost. You have to show me that bidders will behave in the same way in the two auction mechanisms. And there is a difference because in one mechanism bidders are anonymous, in the other they see each other. How could you be sure that they behave in the same way being physically in the same room or virtually without knowing each other in the auction?
I think we don't have this problem in this region because there was one bid before the reform, so there was no competition.
No, probably
But when we'll use more regions,
you can use
that's
another
true.
region as a control group,
Yeah, and then we'll.
solve, isn't it? That, I mean, the control group would behave.
No, they all changed in 2011.
Well, but there is no change. It's not an effect of time. It's an effect of the reform. You want to show that the effect of the reform
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
not over time.
So your proposal is to control having the...
Well, to have a region that is exactly the same. And you see, that would be well, you have to show that there is a parallel trend.
Yeah.
The parallel trend assumption before, and then that there is some change that is due to the reform. And that there is no price change in the control group, and there is a price change in the other one. We have to run the numbers, but that would be the suggestion.
Yeah, we can do it. Thank you.
Start submitting. Start submitting the paper. There is not much to improve fundamentally. There is like base things that you better get to referees and do what referees do.
Heed you or so on.
No, I mean, there's pretty much nothing fundamental.